A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for our final storyteller, James Fitzgerald.
Woo! James! Go ahead, James! James!
So growing up for me, my grandmother was the most influential person in my family. I continuously sought her approval and wanted to make her happy. Well, when I was 16, I just got my driver's license, just got my first car, and a coincidence just so happened to happen in my family. All the adults were busy for Thanksgiving, so no one was available to take my grandmother down to Atlanta to have Thanksgiving with our other extended family. I volunteered, but my grandmother looked at me like I was a kid, which I was. So she didn't have that much trust in me. The responsibility level wasn't that high. So I had to convince her to let me drive her down to Atlanta. She reluctantly agreed, but before we were able to get on the road, she demanded an inspection of my car. So the day before we left, I drive my car over to her house. And the way she describes it is, quote, a death machine. Trying to convince her that it's not a death machine took quite a while. And, soon enough, we were going to be on our way. So early on Thanksgiving morning, we get in the car and we drive down to Atlanta. Now, this is a time before GPS and all that fancy equipment. So all I had at my disposal was mapquest.com. And I printed out the directions and I thought, okay, we're going to be good. And I printed out 2 copies, one for me and one for my grandmother. So even in the passenger seat, she could feel like she was in control. So we drive down to Atlanta, everything goes easy. Good conversation, we're listening to gospel music, so she's happy. We get down to my uncle's house. The Thanksgiving dinner is absolutely delicious. Everyone's having a blast. I'm feeling good, I'm feeling confident. And I'm thinking, okay, what we're gonna do is wake up early tomorrow morning, I'm gonna get her in the car, we're gonna drive back, and then I'm gonna be the hero of the family. So after a great night's sleep, I wake up early in the morning, ready for this drive back. Then it hits me. I printed off directions down to Atlanta, but not going back. I don't panic yet because I'm thinking, hey, we can just take the directions in reverse and get back. So we get in the car and we start driving. Things are going well, we're on the highway. Well, there's a specific fork in this highway that takes you to either I-75 or I-85. Now, remembering what route we took on the way down to Atlanta, it was I-75. But yet again, I want to make my grandmother seem like she has a stake in this and she's partly in control. So I asked her, it's like, hey, Granny, which one do we take, 75 or 85? And she looks at me with the most serious of faces, hey, take 85. In my mind, I'm thinking, no, that's wrong. It's 75. But I just ask again, are you sure? Are you sure, Grandma, it's 70 or 85? And she's like, yes, it's 85. I can't ask again because then it's going to be arguing with my grandmother. And that's something you don't do. So I take I-85 and we're driving. Now, the drive from Atlanta back to Columbia, Tennessee takes about 6 hours. We've been driving for right about 5, and we haven't seen any indication that we're getting closer to Tennessee. But what we do see is this humongous sign welcoming us to South Carolina. For me, I'm a little excited because I'd never been to South Carolina before. And I also knew my grandmother hadn't either. And as I look over at her to see her excitement, I see her crying. I'd never seen my grandmother cry before. I am petrified. I think she had finally realized that not only were we lost, but neither one of us knew anything about where we were at. So I'm trying to compose myself as best as I can to reassure her that we're going to eventually make it back to Tennessee. It's not working very well. She's still crying. So I pull over at a gas station that we find, and I'm thinking to myself, I do not want to go in this gas station because I don't even know where to begin with this story. But I have no choice. So I reluctantly go in the gas station and I ask the attendant, hey, we're trying to get back to Tennessee. What is the absolute quickest route? Because I'm thinking South Carolina, Tennessee, we can do a straight shot. The attendant looks at me and he says very plainly, in order to get back to Tennessee, you're gonna have to go all the way back to Atlanta. And you're gonna get to a fork in the highway that takes you on I-75. And that's how you get back to Tennessee. Now I want to cry because I am thinking to myself, what's my grandmother's reaction going to be when I tell her we have to go all the way back to Atlanta and then start our way back to Tennessee? But I guess I have to man up. So I go out there, I let my grandmother know, hey, we got to go all the way back to Atlanta. It doesn't go over very well. Like, we start driving back, there's no conversation, there's no gospel music playing. We're riding on hopes and dreams to the sound of wind in the air. So eventually, after about 11 hours of driving, we finally pull back into her home in Columbia, Tennessee. I'm beginning to try to figure out how I can start this apology to my grandmother for keeping her, out on the road for 11, 12 hours, making her cry. I don't know where to start with this. But before I could get a word out of my mouth, my grandmother looks at me and she says, I appreciate you driving me down to Atlanta for Thanksgiving. And I hope you know that we would have never made it there and back had it not been for you and your guidance. So I appreciate you so much. I have a renewed sense of trust in you. And for me, that was everything. Because the first thing that my mind went to was that inspection the day before Thanksgiving, where she called my car a death machine. When at the end of the day, it turned out it was a bonding machine for me and my grandmother. Thank you.
Woo!